The CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. As always, here I'm your host, Calvin Glen Alexander. And on tonight's episode of the podcast here, I'm joined by writer for AutzenStadium.com as Oklahoma State's going to face Oregon here in a couple of weeks. We're joined by Dale Bliss. Dale, thanks so much for taking the time here.
Cal, thanks very much. Great to talk college football with you.
Awesome. Well, you know, I don't think I'm giving any Oklahoma State fans any brand new information here when I'm saying that I think it would be a tremendous upset if Oklahoma State really scared Oregon, even in the least bit here in this game here, especially at the end. But I want to ask you here, I mean, from the Oregon perspective, is there any like, hey, you know what, our toughest non-conference opponent here looks to be Oklahoma State or Oregon State, and we're a little bit worried about the first team we play in orange and black or anything like that?
I'm worried about all of them every year. I mean, there's no game in college football that's a guaranteed win. And even though the Cowboys are coming off a 3-9 season, Mike Gundy hasn't forgotten how to coach. The man had 18 winning seasons in a row in Stillwater. They finished in the top 10, I think the top 25, 10 times. They had, in 2012, they were 12-1 and number 3 in the country. He hasn't forgotten how to coach. They're rebuilding this year, but I have every confidence they'll be ready to play and looking to kind of turn the page from a tough year last year.
Yeah, I can hope so as well. I was looking up the all-time record. We've only played once before, and it was back in 2008, which not too long ago, of course. But Oregon just kind of, beat Oklahoma State by 11. There's not that many other matchups that I could find really in any other sport necessarily. Are you thinking at all here that maybe new quarterback, it's off to a slow start, Montana State's not that tough of a matchup week 1, where maybe Oklahoma State can do a couple more things, stay in the game later on? Or do you think this would be a situation where it's more of a shootout where Oklahoma State could kind of hang in there? Or would it be a defensive battle?
Yeah, early season games are unpredictable. Last season, the Ducks had an opener with Idaho of the Big Sky, and it was a game that wasn't decided until the fourth quarter. I mean, the Vandals were just ready to play. The Oregon offensive line was a little disorganized. It was early in the year, and it was a 24-14 final, and they needed a drive in the fourth quarter to put it away. So, nothing is guaranteed. Nothing is easy. You've got to earn the preseason. It's a challenge for the Cowboys because they're choosing between two quarterbacks that haven't yet thrown a pass in college football, although they both have good talent.
Yeah, I've said the fun Oklahoma State fact here is that we've got one guy on the roster who's thrown a touchdown for the team or against Oklahoma State, though. And it's a wide receiver, Sam Jackson, the 5th. He's thrown a touchdown when he played for TCU, and he was a quarterback. So he was recruited by our now offensive coordinator, Doug Meacham. But I agree with you. I don't know what to make of the quarterback battle in Stillwater. I think it'll be tough either way to kind of know who's going to be QB1. The first week we play UT Martin, which all due respect, can't overlook another 11 guys suiting up on the other side of the ball. But that's one that you would think that we just would go in there, not stress about too much. And then we've got to go all the way to Eugene. And I've heard Autzen Stadium is one heck of a tough environment to play in. I haven't been there myself for a game. I did tour the campus one year driving through in the summer. But do you think that there is just such a massive home field advantage that this could be Oregon by 30 to 40 points? Or do you really think that this will be like close all the way to the end, kind of like Boise State versus Oregon was last year?
The line will probably come in somewhere around, I haven't looked it up yet, but I'd say it's probably going to come in somewhere around, Oregon plus 19. But to me, that doesn't matter. To the Ducks, that doesn't matter. they're looking at this as a game to prepare for a season where they have high ambitions. And, you really can't take an opponent for granted, especially when, Coach Gundy's brought in 40 transfers. This will be a completely different team from the team that went 3-9 last year and lost to Colorado 52-0. They're going to be much better. They're going to want to create a new identity for themselves. And what better way to do that than to take the game physically to an overconfident team from the Big Ten? And so that's potentially what they're wanting to do going in. And you just can't, I think as a responsible reporter about a team, you just can't go and do, this one's going to be easy, they're going to win handily. I never think that way. The Ducks have a lot to prove and a lot to straighten out as a team. It's a completely new secondary, 5 new starters in the secondary. There's good talent back there, but they haven't played a game together yet. It's a new offensive line. They sent all 5 starters to the NFL over the last season. 2 got drafted, 3 as free agents. So there's some rebuilding. There's some reorganizing. This team only has 5 returning starters. So to assume they're just going to walk over Oklahoma State or anybody is really silly. I don't think it's responsible to think that way.
Well, I love hearing that, of course, as an Oklahoma State alum and fan. When it comes to Oregon's aspirations here, let's say this game goes kind of how the lines makers are thinking it will go, and it's, it's not an Oklahoma State win and it's an Oregon win. I'm looking at the silver lining here of going, all right, well, you know what? Oregon beat us. It's their place. We can't wait to play them before too long at our place here. But what's Oregon's aspirations for this season? I mean, I assume national title hopes, because that seems like it's every season at this point with Dan Lanning.
He's 35-6 as Oregon coach, and they finished in the top 10 the last 3 seasons. Duck fans are kind of pointing toward making the playoffs and finishing maybe 10-2. I mean, that's the hope. In the AP poll, they were number 7. Every AP voter ranked them between 1 and 10. So it's pretty consistent there that they're a contender, but making the leap from contender to, actually making the playoffs means you have to be ready every week and play your opponent strong. By the way, Cal, I looked it up while you were talking, and 11 times the Cowboys have finished in the top 25 since Coach Gundy has been there. They've won 10 or more games 8 times. So he hasn't forgotten how to coach, and they'll be a much improved team this year. I think they'll surprise a few people, hopefully not the Ducks.
Fair enough. Well, the first 3 games that Oregon plays this year are all against, besides Montana State, are against, major opponents here, all in the Power 4 now. But the Oklahoma State matchup, of course, at home, go to Northwestern, and then have Oregon State at home. Which would be the worst of those 3 to lose to? If I'm an Oregon fan looking at it, I'm trying to kind of set the bar here for the Oklahoma State expectations of, what we should be hoping for and want and all type of stuff here. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to also kind of go, maybe this year, coming off that 3-9 season, we're a little bit in that group with Northwestern, Oregon State, even if it is just for this year.
Every loss is horrible. I mean, anytime the team loses, I'm depressed until Tuesday. Objectively, the worst loss would be losing to an FCS team in game 1, but no loss is good. Of their 4 early season opponents, Oklahoma State's the one that's from the Big 12, Oklahoma State. So the Cowboys are a Big 12 opponent. They play, Division I football. That if you were to match up Oklahoma State against any one of those other 3 teams, the Cowboys would probably win the game. They'd at least be favored. So, objectively, that they're the toughest opponent in those first 4. Dan Lanning has done a good job over the time he's been at Oregon at getting his team ready every week. He's 25-0 against teams not ranked in the top 25. So he's done a very good job of taking care of business, focusing on the opponent at hand, and not looking ahead to people. That'll be an especially hard challenge this year with Penn State on the schedule on September 27th, the number 2 team in the country. But the only way they're ready to play a good game in Happy Valley is to focus week 1, week 2, and week 3 with, no looking ahead, no taking anybody for granted.
Makes a ton of sense there for sure. When it comes to playing Oregon, one of the more fun things I didn't have here on the list is the uniform matchup. Is there any kind of favorable matchup you'd want to see for Oklahoma State? Should we just wear white and just make it easy? Oregon could wear whatever colors and it wouldn't mesh that badly, because orange and green are not two colors that go together necessarily unless you're Miami, but that's the exception.
Yeah. I don't know. It's fun. I like the alternative uniforms that the Cowboys wear. Oregon, you just never know what you're going to get. They have something like 2 zillion uniform combinations. I'm sure they'll dress out for the Cowboys. Autzen Stadium's a tremendous atmosphere. It's very loud, very raucous. There's a river walk to the stadium before the game, a lot of great traditions. Definitely the colors will look good, and it will be a fun matchup in that way.
Well, there's one guy I know a weird amount of information about, and that's it seems like quarterback here in Dante Moore. Got a lot of family who are UCLA fans or UCLA grads, and of course that's where he started his college career. And I saw him play the Rose Bowl a couple of times, but transferring to Oregon, sitting out last year, and Dylan Gabriel kind of just being one heck of a great quarterback. What are the expectations here at quarterback for Oregon? Is this Dante Moore's job just period, and he's going to be named the starter here shortly, or what do you think is going to happen?
Officially, Dan Lanning would answer the question every single time he's asked, the way probably Gundy would too. It's a competition, and it's a competition until, we come out of the tunnel for game 1. But the consensus around the program and listening to people is that Dante Moore is the likely starter. I mean, he has 9 games experience as a college quarterback. He started 5, didn't play well as a freshman at UCLA. Tough situation for him, thrown into the fire right away with a not great offensive line. He was sacked 25 times in 9 games. Moore completed about 53.5% of his passes, threw for 1,600 yards, 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. So the big thing that he had to correct in coming to Oregon was his decision-making. He's got a great arm, really a pro-level arm. He can make any throw on the field. The question within is, how well is he going to play under fire? His old coach, Chip Kelly, who's also, the old coach at Oregon, used to like to say a quarterback is like a tea bag. You don't know what you get until you put them in hot water. Well, Dante Moore is going to be in the hot water in another 2 weeks, and we'll see how much he's grown, taking that year off to reset. He made a really mature decision in deciding to come to Oregon, play behind a veteran, absorb the system, and give himself a chance to sort of remake himself as a college quarterback. He was a great prospect coming out of high school, number 3 recruit in the country. The only quarterbacks ahead of him were Nico Iamaleava and I think DJ Lagway in his class. No, Arch Manning. Lagway was a different year. So, he's got lots of talent. It's just a question of how well he puts it together and how well he makes decisions under fire.
Well, I've seen that the Oregon running back here has gotten some maybe Doak Walker Award type of nomination kind of consideration here. And, of course, always that's the one thing I know for sure about being all the way in Oklahoma versus Oregon is that you guys got some speedsters for sure there. What do you think the potential of this team is? Do you think there is a shot here of making the national championship game with this Oregon team, considering all the great athletes on the team?
I think they're about plus 1,200 at FanDuel to win the national championship. So the odds are fairly long. I would consider it success if they made it to the playoffs and won a playoff game. As to the running backs, nobody knows more about running backs than Oklahoma State fans. You have one of the all-time greats, and in Barry Sanders, and of course Ollie Gordon last year was I think a 2-time 1,000-yard rusher. But the Ducks look good in the backfield this year. They brought in a transfer from Tulane, Mekhi Hughes, who in 2 seasons with the Green Wave rushed for 2,779 yards, but 1,982 of those yards were after contact. So he's got really good balance, very tough to the second level. He's not a guy with the elite speed that will break an 80-yard run, but he had 7 runs over 30 yards last season in Tulane.
Well, Dale, also I want to ask you, it's a topic that's not necessarily just about Oregon and Oklahoma State here, but you've been doing this for a while. What do you think of the new transfer portal and how that all works? Is there a better solution that you have in mind at all, too? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
That's a great question, Callie. The transfer portal has been complete madness. The fun part of it is that it gives a chance, like a team like the Cowboys, to reset and redevelop. You can go out and get players. The unfortunate thing about it is that there aren't any breaks. There aren't any parameters or structure for the thing. And so it's gotten to the point that, every player's a free agent every year. And it feels like in the future, at some point, the NCAA or whatever succeeds the NCAA has to have a strong central structure. It has to have leadership and vision. It has to have someone who's looking out for the overall health of the game. I don't think that unlimited free agency and no salary cap is in anybody's best interest. I think it creates just too much chaos, uncertainty, and these kind of unlimited bidding wars for players. You look at, Texas Tech going out and just, stealing people with piles of oil well money. Now, everybody's doing that at this point. The Ducks are doing it as much as anyone. But down the road, it feels like there's got to be maybe something like a collective bargaining agreement, some kind of stability to the whole thing, or where does it end? I mean, what is a high school senior quarterback going to make in 2 or 3 years if this keeps up?
It seems insane. I've got a youngest brother who's currently a D2 player in the NCAA, and the NIL stuff, of course, works completely different when it's soccer in Oklahoma versus football in Oklahoma, and et cetera, et cetera. But the NIL stuff is just very interesting, of all the stuff they have to sign off on and agree to just going to college, that they will meet certain, school guidelines, but there's just nothing really on the NIL side. If you're approached by somebody, hey, let us know, so we can make sure the brand has all the color codes and all that fun stuff, that they just get all the stuff worked in correctly so it doesn't look goofy. But other than that, it's you're your own person if the NIL brand approaches you independently. And that seems bizarre to me, that they don't have to go through more rigorous, like you're saying. There's not a CBA in place. There's not something going on that would be with more parameters. And I'm curious to see what'll happen here with Texas Tech. If they end up being really good this year, or making a bigger jump than they basically have over the past couple of years, and they all of a sudden are in the Big 12 championship game and 10 plus wins, and they don't look like the Tech of old, I'm curious what other schools will think of. Hey, maybe this does work, we should spend a lot of money. Or will no one think of this as a test case at all, and it'll just be, hey, that's Lubbock, Texas, that's out kind of in oil country, and we're going to keep doing our own thing. So I'm really curious to see what will happen with that. I also want to ask you here, I I was born out in San Diego, lived there for 5 years of my life, and then lived back in LA and San Diego a couple years here and there. And it seems so weird seeing Oregon, Washington, UCLA, USC playing more or less Midwestern, but really Eastern Conference teams, and in my mind from Oklahoma, of course, because everything Chicago and East is just more East Coast. But what do you think of it here as an Oregon, writer and someone's been covering the team for so long?
Kelly, it's great to get the national exposure and the national recruiting footprint.
What do you think of Oregon playing so many teams? I mean, you're not playing Rutgers every single year. I get that. But, playing Penn State, playing Wisconsin even, that's one of the more Western teams. It's not necessarily Washington, or Washington State or Oregon State every single year, no matter what. I get it. You're always going to play Washington, I would think. But, kind of those other Pac-12 schools, that's just more of a travel and kind of a weirder matchup to see someone who's a Big 12 fan.
It is so weird. And, the advantages, of course, like I was saying before, are the national recruiting footprint and the exposure all over the country. That's really important for Oregon because this isn't a state that produces a lot of top-end high school talent. The only way the Ducks can stay competitive is to recruit nationally. And they have players on their roster from Florida, from Maryland, from Texas. And that's been the case for quite a while. And in an average year, the state of Oregon produces about 3 Division I players. So, they've got to go and recruit. And being in the Big Ten definitely creates some advantages that way. But to me, the most important thing about college football is the history and tradition and regional appeal, and when you throw that away or endanger it, when you have, Oregon playing Rutgers at 9 a.m. in the morning local time, or Oregon traveling to Iowa, playing on Saturday night in Iowa at Kinnick Stadium, a tough place to play, and then turning around and playing Minnesota at home in Autzen on a Friday night in November, that creates some unique challenges in terms of travel and player health, and even more so for the non-revenue sports. I mean, the volleyball team, the softball team, they have to make those trips. And I look at, what's made college football great for so long. It's those rivalries and those traditions and those teams, and those stadiums you've been to, and those away games that you can travel to in 3 or 4 hours. And when you throw all that away, when you're not playing Stanford and Washington State every year, when you're playing, USC or UCLA 1 year out of 3, well, you've lost something. And I think what will eventually happen, Cal, is that the top 64 teams in college football will break away and form a super conference, and they'll realign, and they'll form divisions that look a lot like the old SWC and the old Pac-8 and the traditional Big Ten. And teams will get back to playing, the teams they grew up playing, the teams that, they played when your dad took you to your first game. And if they persist in having this structure where, Oklahoma State plays Central Florida and West Virginia, it's going to get weird. And over time, college football will look a lot like a watered-down version of the USFL. And that's not what we want. I mean, the history and tradition are really important, and they've got to find a way to preserve those.
Well, when it comes down to, you mentioned a couple teams here, but when it comes down to those former Pac-12 opponents, who would Oregon rather play every single year? Would it be Washington, who seems like you're probably always going to play every year now, or would it be the in-state opponent, Oregon State, which is more of the fierce rivalry going on?
That'd be a tough choice, and they've both grown to be huge rivalries. And I think that Rob Mullins, the Oregon athletic director, is going to do everything he can to clear the deck to keep those teams on the schedule. The Big Ten that's designated Washington as Oregon's anchor opponent, the team they end the year with every season. Oregon recently canceled a home with Utah State, narrowed it down to one game, eliminated two of the games so that they'd have room to add Oregon State back on the schedule. So it looks like they're going to make an effort to preserve those games. But, there's a lot of traditional rivalries they've lost forever. And I'm sure that's probably true with the Cowboys as well. I used to love, Big 8 and SWC football. There were some incredible matchups in those games. And now you got, teams playing in conferences that just don't quite seem right. And that's true of a lot of teams all over the country.
Yeah, there's no chance that I'm making it as an Oklahoma State fan to several games a year. It used to be a couple of games. Used to be West Virginia's been in the conference for some time now. So it used to be that game would be really hard to get to if I wanted to go to. But could make it to most of the Texas schools easily within a day drive or a couple hours. Can definitely make it down to Norman as much as I didn't want to go because we didn't have a really great luck against them in Norman. But, could go down to Texas and see us beat, UT and all the pageantry that they have going on and really see the other kind of side of how college football is celebrated in a huge 100,000 seat stadium that's not Oklahoma State. See how the less orange color there and burnt orange could kind of fare. But I totally agree with you. It seems bizarre that we're not playing OU every single year in Bedlam, at least in some sport. It seems like basketball, we're always trying to figure it out now with a kind of mutual site matchup in between the two schools in Oklahoma City. But I agree. I think it's really weird that I don't have Bedlam to look forward to every single year and hopefully get college game day out in Stillwater for those matchups when we're both top 25 and, have really a lot of fun with those. But it always rings a bell for me as, his grandfather's a huge UCLA fan. And when OU played USC in a national championship game back in the, I think it was back in 2003 or so, if I'm going to get correctly, or maybe 2004, how much he hated USC. And he still does because UCLA and USC are in the same conference, of course. But, I hated OU so much. I was sitting there rooted on USC, and he shot me a glare that I'll never forget. You have no idea how much I hate SC. I'm triple your age almost here, and gave me a hard time. And I thought, hey, I'm going to Oklahoma, Oklahoma State at some point in my life. I'm in third or fourth grade, and there's no way I'm not going to be rooting on the Cowboys every day. OU cannot win a national championship. I'll never hear the end of it in school and whatever. And he was going, trust me, there's no way I want USC to ever win, no matter what your feelings are. So those matchups, and I totally agree. Just go away. I'm used to seeing Wisconsin and Oregon in the Rose Bowl, not in a regular season matchup overall. If there was a team or two that you could bring back in every year for Oregon to play, would it just be, because right now it's going to be Washington's always going to play, but would it be Oregon State? Would that be kind of the team to always play every year if Oregon could?
It kind of has to be because the schools it's one of the oldest rivalries in college football. The schools are 45 miles apart down Highway 99. So, there's that proximity thing, and they played each other something like 130 times. The rivalry goes way, way back. So that would have to be right up there. But definitely, I think it adds a lot of juice to the playoffs when you have teams that are from specific regions. And right now, the only conference that has regional integrity, as Greg Sankey likes to point out, is the SEC. Everybody else is playing this kind of bastardized, thrown together sort of conference. It's really weird for Stanford and Cal to be in the ACC. That's strange stuff. I wish them well. They're both fine institutions, but it doesn't make sense from an alumni standpoint, a building interest standpoint. The Cardinals are going to have a hard time filling the visitor section for, games at North Carolina. It just won't happen, even though those Stanford grads are all brilliant and rich. But, that's tough to do.
Yeah, really tough too when it's like Wake Forest or an NC State. It's not a Bill Belichick team or some kind of fun deal going on. I totally agree. I think it's tough for me to think, hey, Cal's playing SMU, and both of those are not technically traditional ACC schools. So that's just a weird thing to kind of think about. How SMU is not just part of the Big 12. In my mind, they should be part of the Big 12 or the SEC for that matter, and be added. And hey, we'll toss you West Virginia or UCF to switch you out so it can be more of kind of a regionality to it. As we kind of wrap up things for a little bit, Dale, I do want to ask you for a score prediction, if you've got one, for our matchup here. Coming up, gosh, just a couple weeks away here, September 6th, so less than a month out. But what do you think score-wise? Do you think this will be a really high-scoring affair, low-scoring? What's your best guess?
Oregon 35, Oklahoma State 21. Now, I could be way wrong. I never bet on college football. I never bet on a game where the ball has pointy ends and the players who play it break up with their girlfriends or eat too much pizza or stay up too late playing video games the night before a game. So, I just don't think there's any predictability to the game, even though I study the stats and matchups as much as I can. I think the Cowboys probably will struggle to move the ball early in their season just because it's an entirely new offense. Doug Meacham's a good offensive coordinator. I think over time they'll build a good offense there, but it's going to be a process for your team this season. Defensively, they have some good talent on that defense, but Oregon's got probably more experience and more talent and the home field advantage. So I look for the Ducks to win that game solidly, but in no way am I overconfident or discounting that, the tradition that Coach Gundy's built out there.
Well, I know all Oklahoma State fans will be happy to hear that and happy to hear Mike Gundy getting some respect, because it seems like half the fan base right now says Gundy's almost on the outs, if not already gone in their minds after last year. But, myself here, I remember the Les Miles days kind of barely as a 32-year-old, but Gundy's been around so long with the program, it seems crazy for have one bad year and then he's just got to go, especially if it turns into 2 seasons in a row. He doesn't make a bowl game, a little bit more room to stand on, but I'm glad that nationally he has a lot of respect, it seems like, from different fan bases that are not just Oklahoma State-wise. So that's always great to hear.
I've always liked him because he's a character. I don't like coaches who give cookie cutter answers to questions. I always loved Mike Leach because you never know what he was going to say or whether he'd go off on a rant about, mascot wars or whatever it happened to be. To me, Gundy is a really refreshing, honest, genuine, real guy. He obviously knows the sport. I mean, he was Barry Sanders' quarterback, for goodness sake. The whole thing with the NIL and the portal is that it's ratcheted up expectations for every coach. The perception among the fans is that, well, we can just rebuild. We've got the portal. We've got NIL. We can get players in here. There's no reason we can't be competitive every single season. Well, the problem with that is everybody else has an NIL too. And the pressure to win, it's even greater than it's ever been. And the fact that a guy could have 18 winning seasons in a row and be on the hot seat the next year is a little bit nuts.
Yeah, and with the transfer portal, I think a lot of expectations are raised because you see guys who are transferring to OSU from LSU or Ohio State or any of these really big name programs. And what I figured out doing more and more kind of research here is that, hey, the guy might have transferred from LSU to Ohio State to Oklahoma State, but he took 6 snaps. He was injured. Yeah, he was a backup. There was something going on. There's not a career, oh my gosh, we're getting this guy as a grad transfer who's put up, 4 years of incredible stats, and last year he was injured, but still had his red shirt and then came to Oklahoma State. We're not getting a lot of these guys here in that are just completely, oh my gosh, knock your socks off, going to start week 1, take over and win the Blitnikoff or the Heisman or anything crazy. Those guys aren't transferring. those guys are being paid to stay on the rosters, especially at these bigger name programs too. Maybe we got a guy from UTEP that I'm really excited about on the defensive line because I think he could be a guy who's good. He played a lot of snaps. He seems like he's gotten better, and Oklahoma State will definitely help you get better while you're here and turn in from a 2-star to a third-round draftee. But I agree. I think expectations have been raised, and a lot of it is for just kind of the wrong reasons, because a lot of the transfer guys are just, hey, they came from here, they must be good, right? When in fact, yeah, they came from a great school like UCLA or Oregon or wherever, but that does not mean that they are just incredibly talented or experienced or both, for that matter. So, well, Dale, thanks so much for joining here on the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. Really, really appreciate you taking the time. If you want to go check out, I'm sure you'll write up some Oklahoma State stuff here if you haven't already, and go check out AutzenZoo.com. I'll have a link here in the description of wherever you're listening to the podcast or watching it on YouTube. And Dale, one more time here, thanks so much again.
Cal, I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun talking to you, and good luck this season.
Thank you so much. I think we'll need it, but I hope we don't.